Almighty.
Can you say that again?
Zombie means the original ancestor, good God Almighty, the spirit that all things that ever express themselves in time and space was born from. You know what I'm saying? So in zombie, it's not just Adam. In zombie is actually the birthplace of all things. You know, the origin of all things. And again, when you're starting to talk about things at that scale, there's no room for you to change anything. There's a word for Oludumare in Yoruba, a praise call. It goes, "O Yigi Yigi Yota." O Yigi Yigi Yota means the immovable rock of ages. You know what I'm saying? It's this idea that time and space is the present, is a rock that cannot be changed. It's a precision machine. It's the reason why if your great grandma had turned right instead of left, you wouldn't be here. It's the reason why if there wasn't slavery, I wouldn't be here. You know what I'm saying? It's the reason why being is always built upon being. And if it didn't exist in the past, if there was no ladder to what is now, it wouldn't be. And what we are doing is the ladder to make all things that are possible for the future. And that process is precision. And it isn't, there cannot be even the slightest mistake from moment to moment. I mean, we are doing this stuff on a single cellular basis. You know, that each ejaculate has to have that specific sperm at that specific time to reach that specific ovum at that specific moment in which that soul is congealed, and then a whole, you know, there's a precision there that boggles the mind, and yet it's the same precision that pushes out all of the enzymes and various proteins that control our actions and control the way we see the world, and are affected by our actions and are affected by the way we see the world. You know, oxytocin, the moral molecule, is to me an expression of Yemoja. Yemoja is the mother of the children of the fishes of the sea. She's the ocean itself. She is the feminine quality of constantly sifting through her soul, trying to figure out what is right, what is wrong, and how can she make more right out of what is wrong. You know what I'm saying? She is the blues itself. She is Bessie Smith, you know, talking about my man's got a heart like a stone in the sea. That is ultimate Yemoja saying, you know, because her soul is the sea, and she's got her man's heart. You know what I'm saying? So you have Yemoja wearing her pain. Iya means the owner of pain. That's what they actually call mother in Yoruba. It's like many words in Yoruba, it is a compound sentence. So when they say mother, what they're saying is, this is the owner, the person who went through the pain to make me possible, you know? And there's this whole idea that the ocean went through the pain of making all of life possible. And that pain, that difficulty of bringing life after generation of life after, is what made the ocean salty. You know what I'm saying? You know? And then of course you have the fresh waters, you know, that everyone seeks, that glistens and gleams, you know what I'm saying? That's Oshun, society. There is no city that doesn't grow up on the skirts of a river, the river basin being her skirt. You know what I'm saying? We are right now on the skirt of Oshun. You know, basically semen moving through the fresh waters. You know what I'm saying? And she is fresh, you know. That is the nature of society. So you have these salty women, you have these fresh women, and then you have the woman that is scary like the open air. You know what I'm saying? Oya, the copper-colored whirlwind, hurricane. She is very much the Statue of Liberty, which was originally made by the French to celebrate the freedom of slaves before European Americans said, well, we'd rather celebrate Europeans coming as immigrants in here than celebrate our African American freed citizens, you know, which I think a lot of people who come through Ellis Island should consider that you may not have had anything to do with slavery, but the reason why you were welcomed into these lands without papers, which is what WAP means, which is basically an illegal immigrant according to today's standards, you know, was because of the fears of the political prowess of these newly freed African Americans and them being engaged in the promise of democracy that this country was built on promising them, you know. But in any case, here we all are together, and our culture is so very, very African. If you are an American artist today, there's so much of what you do in your practice that has its roots in West and Central African culture. For instance, if you are someone who is working with found objects, or assemblage, if you are someone who has studied the expressionist movement, or rock and roll, if you are someone that looks at something that you would think of as being quintessentially European American, like square dancing. Square dancing actually comes out of the royal court of the Oyo Empire of Nigeria. When people dance for Orisha, they dance just like the square dancers do, where they call out, everybody get in a circle, everybody ring in a circle, all the people turn, all the people turn. This is not something you find in classical European arts. This is something you find in classical West and Central African art. So you have this long history of cultural exchange, but that exchange never being registered, never being academicized, no one actually knowing that Africans contributed to these things. For instance, I'm sure everybody in the room has been through an African initiation without knowing. It's a very specific African initiation. It's for Babu Aye. Babu Aye was a member of the Oyo Empire of Yoruba land, and he spread this initiation all through West and Central Africa. His name, Babu Aye, means the owner of the earth. And one of the things he was famous for was saying that the greed of man will push the temperature of the earth like a fever and create pestilence that will make grains pop up on our skin for all the greed that we rape the earth with to create grains. You know what I'm saying? So when you hear people talking about climate change today, you can count this royalty of the 1400s also with predicting climate change and our greed, and how it would change the temperature of the earth, and because of the change in the temperature of the earth, open up diseases that would never have occurred otherwise. He also discovered, after being attacked by smallpox, that he could overcome smallpox because he had already overcome cowpox. And he went ahead and started to put people through an initiation where basically, because smallpox and these viral diseases start within families and then move out to communities and then move out into nations, but there's intimacy in which they are spreading through. Just like our computers today, when something goes viral, it starts off with an intimate circle of friends, and then their friends, then no friends, then no friends. That kind of contagious movement, even though you can't see the small virus, you can see this movement. You can see a viral movement, and recognize how things grow through casual encounters amongst people. He started to initiate people by giving them a dose of cowpox with a knife, and this early European doctors felt that this was witch doctor nonsense, and felt there was no science to the Africans' claims that this protected them from smallpox, until here in the United States, this slave owner was noticing that all his slaves that went through the initiation weren't dying from smallpox, and said, maybe there's something to that. And they called it vaccination because it's of the cow, from the cow that they were able to get the disease. Vaccine is Roman for the cow, Latin for the cow. So basically, you have all of these contributions that people have no idea were made. I always think about George Bush when he was criticizing Ronald Reagan about trickle-down economics, which he had every right to criticize Ronald Reagan about. Trickle-down economics was an absolutely foolish mathematical model that made no sense and did not work in real life. However, he tried to make that known by calling it voodoo mathematics, as if anything a witch doctor or a voodoo practitioner would say was going to be absolutely ridiculous and unapplicable to reality, nothing more than superstitious myth. But the fact of the matter is that our computers work on voodoo mathematics. Our computers use binary system, and Europeans got binary system from the Dogon. And the Dogon was using it as a divination system, just like the Yoruba and the Congo. All across West and Central Africa, binary code was used to divine and basically hold information that made it possible for people to see into the deep past and see into the deep future. Very similar to the I Ching in Chinese cultural tradition. Yes.
Is the Dogon, is that D-O-G-O-N?
Yes, D-O-G-O-N.
Okay.
Yeah. If you have any questions about spelling, I'd be happy to share that with you.
I was saying earlier how I'm really inspired by a lot of the mask making and stuff, and their masks, I think, are some of the most amazing.
Yeah, and the ideas behind those masks are equally mesmerizing. If you look into Yoruba Odu, which is what they call binary culture. Remember Olodu for God? Odu, basically it's saying that binary code is the code of God. And it's absolutely true. All of life is built on binary code. DNA runs by binary code. So, the Yoruba and West Africans and Central Africans were using the fundamental code of reality and introduced it to Europeans. These kinds of contributions are on a scale that most people have no concept it could ever actually be this way, but it is. It is in Wakanda. I'm talking about actual history, and actual scientific contributions that the Yoruba have made. And there are other insights that may not have influenced European culture, but basically came to the Yoruba far before it did to European culture. Like, for instance, evolution. Darwin came up with his concept of evolution in the 1900s, but Yemoja, which means the mother of the children of the fishes of the sea, implies a knowledge of evolution that goes back 1,000 years, where the Yoruba recognized either through comparative anatomy, probably through comparative anatomy, that all land animals have the same characteristics going back more and more rudimentary until you hit fish. And it's obvious that we all shared an ancestry with fish, and that our ancestors came out of the ocean. That's why Yemoja is the mother of the children of fishes, which is us, the children of fishes. And the Yoruba would actually score their children, cut their children's faces so that they'd have gills on their cheeks, so that when they returned, when they passed away to the ocean, Yemoja would remember her children. Of course, they today recognize that our ears were once gills, and that they changed over time. The small muscles and bones that we used to pass water over what were gills, the gill became the eardrum, and the small bones and muscles became the hammer, over time. And it is just that kind of change that Yemoja and Oya represent as the two holders of the crypt. Yemoja is the watery heaven, and then Oya is the celestial heaven. And Oya is the Orisha of change, whereas Yemoja is the owner of rules and regulations. So
Which one's which?
Yemoja is the ocean, the owner of rules and regulations, governance, the salty old woman that runs things, and Oya is the marketplace, the environment of change. She is the terror, the whirlwind. She is what, when it's quiet and placid, you don't even notice exists. But when it roars and is angry, you can't see anything but it. And she is the wings of change. So there is a bit of a conflict. Rules and regulations are conservative, in Yoruba, like for instance in our political system, you have a red and a white and a blue and a white. For Western Central African culture, like Chinese culture, the idea of a hot and a cool is very important. The yin and the yang. In Yoruba, the hot and the cool, Yemoja is the cool ocean water. Oya is the hot, fresh air. You know what I'm saying? So Oya is the winds of change. So it isn't until you get out of the rules and regulations of the ocean that your ear is allowed to, through the winds of change, become not a gill but a listening device. And you see this over and over as things leave the past rules. Like for instance, when desegregation happened, the Black Babe, Henry Gibson, who had hit more home runs than Babe Ruth, suddenly found himself out of a job because he was not able to move into, like Jackie Robinson, into the European American dominated league. This is a winds of change. This is a situation in which, because rules and regulations have stopped, all of the things that you had in the past now change into a whole new object. This is what happens when Ogun marries Oya. Ogun saw a wildebeest in the forest, and he went to shoot it, but as it went down to drink some water, it turned into a woman, a beautiful woman. And he said, "Oh, I'm in love with you. Can I be your husband?" And she said, "Yes, you can, but you can never tell anybody what you saw in the forest. You can never tell anybody that I'm truly a buffalo." And he swears he'll never tell anybody. And he comes home, and Yemoja and all his other wives are around, and they decide to get him drunk.
Do we know where this is going? Do we know where this is going?
Yeah, they decide to get him drunk, and he tells them Oya's secret. Oya comes back And Yemoja says, "Oh, so you're such a buffalo lady, huh?" She gets upset and takes all of his weapons. And this is the winds of change, moving Ogun from being a hunter-gatherer to being a farmer, because he had to make new tools now that Oya took his
So the sword and the plowshare kind of thing, yes, same deal.
But it's also this idea of evolution, this idea from a Yoruba perspective, they would never call it evolution or progress, because that pits the ancestor against the child. That says that the ancestor was less than, primitive, did not know, and the child does know, and the child is better than what it came from. The Yoruba are working very hard not to make that assertion. What the Yoruba are saying is that because you left the environment of one rules and regulations, this new environment that you came into, you have to reapply what you've known to a new environment. So it isn't that the farmer is a better, more efficient, more smart way of life than the hunter-gatherer. It is that because Oya took away the hunter-gatherer's tools, the farmer had to expand into husbandry in order to survive. You know what I'm saying? So Oya is again the weather, the environment. So the Pataki makes as much sense from an anthropological point of view as it does from the point of view of the angel versus society. You know what I'm saying?
When you describe the beginning, this, I don't remember the language for it, this universal fact, you know, it sounded like everything would be preordained. Is that true? When you said everything was so precise, you know?
We are the present precise tool of ordainity. We exist in the present, and as long as we exist in this present, we are the tool by which this perfect precision machine is operating. You know, so even though we have free will and can do whatever we like, everything that will ever happen depends on us doing exactly what we do. You get what I'm saying? That's why there's this concept of God being good all the time, because perfection is unavoidable. You can't escape perfection from this West African point of view, which is very different from the European point of view, where you can never attain perfection. You get what I'm saying?
Right. Like I could say, oh, I've had it with this world, and I'm going to be an outlaw. I'm going to be a bad guy. I'm going to do something that's going to fuck it all up. But that's precision itself, right?
Not only is it precision itself, but it is an expression of good God Almighty itself through these angels. The reason why you feel like you are done with this world is because you recognize there's another set of rules, another set of regulations that you really want to apply to, another environment, another way of being, another code. You know what I'm saying? It isn't that what is bad. It's that you are just turning into something else. You know what I'm saying? And that kind of propulsion through life, you still strive. You still want to express yourself in the ways that most reflect your characteristics and what you feel are valuable. But it becomes much harder for you to say someone else is evil or someone else is wrong or to be a hater. I call these types of philosophies pre-Edenic philosophies. They are the contract we had before we ate of the knowledge of good and evil. The first contract was to eat of the knowledge of good. The first contract was to eat of the tree of life. The tree of life is goodness. And that is what these West and Central African cultures are completely anchored in. They're anchored in this concept that all of the angels can only bless you. I was talking to him earlier about Obatala and how Obatala is the sculptor of life, and how when children are born albino or dwarfism or gigantism, all of these birth defects as far as European culture would go, because European culture is always looking for the illness. From a West and Central African point of view, these things are blessings, signatures of the Orisha, reminding us of their existence. You know what I'm saying? They are proof positive of God being good, instead of proof positive of illness and God making mistakes. You know what I'm saying? So these kinds of engines of seeing what would be perceived as a weakness as a strength, or what would be perceived as something to avoid as something to desire, or what would be perceived. These are the reasons why African American culture has been such a persistent resistance to European culture, because the whole idea of making a peon of someone is that they go through a road that both of you decide is not a nice road to go through. They fulfill a role that both of you decide is not the role they would, and they would much rather be in your role, but because you have the power, you make them play their role. What becomes interesting is that African Americans resist that by not fighting and tying bombs onto their children so that they could play the superior role, not escalating the violence so that they could play the superior role, but play their role, the role that's supposed to be hated, the role that you're supposed to flee from. Play their role in such a way that the other side wants to be with them. And they've done it consistently, generation after generation, whether you go as far back as country music, or whether you follow it through to the gospel and the blues and rock and roll and disco and jazz and hip hop, all created by communities that nobody wanted to be in and no one wanted to listen to. You know what I'm saying? All created by the hated communities of this country, but nonetheless all coming together to find what this country values the most. You get what I'm saying? So it's in this way that West and Central African culture has been fighting what Christ called the tree that bears no fruit, which is the tree of the knowledge of evil, which is what Africans say, what African Americans say is throwing shade, you know, because there's nothing left of the tree but the shade it throws on people. You know what I'm saying?
I just had to smile too when you were first talking about it, because one of my favorite books that I have is Beyond Good and Evil by Friedrich Nietzsche. So it's cool to hear that.
Yeah, when I was a kid growing up in East New York, I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and this 5%er came and sat down with us in a circle like you guys are all in with me, and he said, you know, the black man is God, each one of you are God. Forget this mysterious God, delve into yourself and come up with the word, and when you speak the word will be born, and your divine nature will show you the road to God, you know. And we all had to come up with a name that was our divine nature, our name that expressed what God was for us. And my name, Soul Zax, is from that time. In cipher with my friends, one of the things that we all decided on was that God was solid. You know what I'm saying? That we may be moving through time and space, but God was the solidity of it. That there was no that we were all like gaseous compared to a solid God.
Who was the guy that Rick? sat with you?
He was a
that?
5%er. A 5%er is a sector of the Nation of Islam. You know Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam. Well, in prison there was a member. I believe he was Ben X was his name, and he felt that the Nation of Islam was not militant enough, and he decided to set up the Nation of Gods and Earths, where the black man is God, the black woman is the earth. And his concept was that the black man, that only 5% of the black man would recognize his divinity. And he sent out convicts as they were leaving the prison with the specific mission of going to playgrounds and sitting with kids and having them search out their divine name, search out their divinity, because they were tired of the mysterious God. They wanted the God that actually speaks the word, you know, the black man. And then, you know, once he speaks the word is light, and it would fertilize the earth and life would grow. You know what I'm saying? So
just my curiosity, did you keep in touch with this man?
No, not at all.
It's like there and
yeah, but it was a whole thing. He came to my playground, but then by 2 or 3 months later, you couldn't walk down the street, you couldn't get past the corner without saying, what's today's mathematics and alphabets? And it was some 13-year-old looking at a whole bunch of 9-year-olds saying, what's today's? And on that street corner, you'd have to make your argument about the divinity of God and what it means that day with today's math. And, you know, if it was a Monday, you'd have to be about the black man, the original man is Monday, you know, and make a whole argument, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, to me it was very similar to what I read Jerusalem was like when Christ was coming up, where on every street corner people were arguing about the nature of God.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No,
So
it seems like Talmudic kind of debate, you know, it's
yeah,
like
exactly.
training.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and when you look at hip hop, the Wu-Tang Clan, Rakim, all those cats were 5%ers. All those cats went through something similar as I went through in the cipher, arguing the nature, the divinity of God and what that divinity means in the soul of man. You know what I'm saying? You know?
I just read, I think it's You God. He just published a memoir, and he talked a lot about what you're talking about. It's pretty interesting.
I've met You God. You know, I don't know him well, but I met him a couple of times, and he's a very devout 5%er. Just everyone on Wu-Tang Clan are devout 5%ers, and You God is his divine name. And what does it say? It says You God. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's very much the type of definition of God that we were looking for at that age. You know, so my mom's was studying English at Medgar Evers, so she had Beyond Good and Evil, and I read thus books, Zashusa, you know, however you say that, you know, because I was on this mission about, you know, good and bad, because I rejected the white man as the devil. Not that the white man wasn't the devil, but that I saw the devil as just being another mask that God wears. You know, I saw that the mystery of God is to believe that there's something other than God going on here. You know what I'm saying? And basically, I read Don Juan. You know, that opened me up. I mean, I was only like 12 years old, but these books were available to me. You know what I'm saying? So I read Carlos Castaneda's Don Juan, and I read The Dance of the Woolly Masters. You know what I'm saying? And then I came across Herman Hesse's Damien, and I remember thinking it was about the Omen, you know, because that movie was out at the time. but it ended up being about Gnostics. And I have my first name Solid, but then in the book, was the first time I saw somebody discuss God that was both good and evil and one whole God, which was the Gnostic term Abraxas. Abraxas is a Greek word that breaks down into Greek words and letters like Hebrew are the same thing. And the Greek word breaks down into 365 because it was thought that God spoke, "Let there be light," and it echoes 365 times in the eternal year, which is God body. And to me that made perfect sense because that's what we were talking about in the streets, that the word is God, that the light is God, and that God body is this eternal expression of God. And these 365 days are all angels, and the 365 nights are all angels. And that the Gnostics were looking for someone to bind the angels together because 1/3 of the heavenly host had been rejected and thrown to earth. You know what I'm saying? So,
I can't help think too about, sorry to
No,
interrupt,
please.
but kind of not having things be binary, like either this or that, but like good and evil coming together and being kind of a whole. I feel like maybe the powers that be, want to play divide and conquer. They want things to be separate and this or that. But these theories that are more unifying might not be what some people in power would want to be taught.
Soul School is all about just offering these ideas. I just feel like there's nobody really speaking about these ideas. People are fighting right now over what's truth and what's a lie. From my perspective, it's impossible to lie. There is no such thing as a lie. All we do is exchange information. How that information is interpreted is completely esoteric. You know what I'm saying? There's no way to actually measure how information is interpreted until you see the response to that information. You know what I'm saying? And once you see the response to that information, you can only make assumptions. You know what I'm saying? Of how that information was interpreted and why a person responded like that or a thing responded like that. I feel that light is the first language. And yes, of course, you can see things like, for instance, there's those weird photographs that are coming up all over the social internet where a dog's face is coming out of a woman's head because of the angle it's shot at. Is that a lie? No, that's an actual thing that the light said. But it said something in such a way that you interpret it as being impossible. You know what I'm saying? So when I look at Trump, it doesn't surprise me that he could say he had the perfect call. Yeah, every call is perfect. But that doesn't stop us from doing our due diligence and seeing the one way that things express themselves. Not that that one way is a lie or the truth, but it is the most empirically observable evidence of what occurred. You know what I'm saying? And we have to put weight on it. The same weight we put on when we design something, so that we know we're not going to kill each other when we get into our machines or go into our buildings. Yes, it's true. It's all true. But you have to acknowledge the weight of accuracy and the weight of accurate reflection. Now, once you get the accurate reflection right, add on whatever you want to add on. Things can get really deep. You know what I'm saying? But usually the simplest situation is what it is. It is what it is. And that's something I think we're going to have to work on more and more as a society, as it becomes easier and easier for us to manipulate information to the point where you can actually make a reasonable facsimile of empirically observed events. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And we're right at that point. You know,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it seems we're very close to being able to one day render matter. You know, and if you're rendering atoms into molecules and putting molecules together, then the truth is almost moot. It really is what it is, you know? And we have to be prepared for that mentally and philosophically. And I feel that our preoccupation with trying to find lies, with trying to find evil, with trying to punish bad is detrimental to our future, because we're becoming too powerful to think in those terms. You know what I'm saying?
Maybe on the side, but are there ethics in this?
Yes, of course there are ethics. Like I said, Yemoja is the owner of rules and regulations. If something bothers you, it bothers you for a good damn reason. You know what I'm saying? You know, it isn't like that bother is something
So
you're going to
rules
ignore.
and regulations are ethics of some kind.
Ethics, to me, are what generates rules and regulations. It is because we only want to reward certain characteristics and we want to limit the expression of other characteristics that we make rules and regulations. But the fact of the matter is that what's important to understand is that we're attacking characteristics. Those characteristics, yes, they're expressed by people, but they are first and foremost characteristics. You cannot take a characteristic out of time and space very easily. A characteristic will self-organize itself back into time and space because the characteristics are eternal. They're spiritual. They're waiting for matter to express them, you know. And matter always steps its foot into the goo, right into the shit, you know, right into Odu, you know what I'm, right into the space where it's going to happen. You can't stop people from drinking on the street corner without being intensely violent and without pushing a whole group of people into slavery. You know what I'm saying? There's going to be a segment of society that's going to want to do heroin, that's going to want to smoke reefer. Just as sure as there's going to be a section of society that doesn't want to do it and feels that they're right to keep the other one from doing it for moral, ethical reasons. But really, it is about trying to control the angels that come out of these people, with the angels, the characteristics that come out of these people when they're drunk. You know, Christ is all about upending the rules that the righteous were trying to put on people. You know, the wine he drank was all about showing people who were very uncomfortable with drunkenness, that drunkenness was a holy, divine being that needed to be expressed by people. You know what I'm saying? Bob Marley, he's talking about this reefer here, but he's talking about a characteristic that is brought out by that reefer, and a characteristic so real that it almost has a politics to it. You know what I'm saying? Which is the reason why the right went off on reefer. Reefer has no real, you can't overdose on reefer. There's no, it doesn't rack your body like alcoholism does. There's no physical reason to be so violently against marijuana other than the philosophical, political, and spiritual characteristics that it develops in people. And that's what Europeans were really afraid of. That's why they called it reefer madness. That's why they were afraid of what their children would do on reefer in the 60s. Because of this ability reefer has to open up your mind to non-European thinking, to recognizing that maybe the best thing in the world is not being the best thing and leaving everything else worse. You know what I'm saying? You know, maybe we could all be best together, you know, and that this is not a monopoly in which I have to own everything and everybody has to now pay me with money they don't have and feel miserable. You know what I'm saying? which is unfortunately what classical European culture was based on. Classical European culture was based on this notion that there was a singular divinity, a family divinity, a nobility, you know? If you look at the periodic table, you see the origin of the concept of nobility. There are the noble elements. But one thing I can tell you about the noble elements is that none of them are necessary in life. Life is not made of nobility. Life can only occur with elements that need something from other elements, with elements that are willing to work together in collaboration with each other to make something happen that they all want. You know what I'm saying? The noble elements, they have no control over the other elements. The only control they have is over themselves. So if you really want to be nobility, stop telling the other elements the laws they should live by. Let them be free, and you live by your noble discipline. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, the only thing wrong with me is you telling me there's something wrong with me. You know what I'm saying? You know, I mean, this is the nature of characteristics and how deeply they are interwoven into the very scientific models that people now recognize make our experience happen. So when you see somebody acting all noble, acting all higher than, it's only because society still thinks on some level that it's best to be at peace. And that brings me back to the duality we were talking about. In the beginning, when that singularity started to express itself and expand, and all of the heat and all of the energy and all of the spirit and all of the diversity of all of creation was all one thing, they called it the supersymmetricity. There was an absolute balance between everything all at once. No time, no space, because everything was locked as one. You had everything in perfect balance, but thankfully it wasn't. Some little 0.0000001% of that energy was more matter than antimatter. And the matter and the antimatter completely obliterated itself, and all that's left is the little bit that was out of balance. The little bit that did not seek peace, the little bit that did not find its soulmate and go off into a peaceful heaven. We are matter. We are the little bit that desire to be here. We are the little bit that's willing to work together to always satisfy that desire, only to find new desires. Because there is nothing here but desire. We all get to enjoy our peace. Unlike the atoms we're made of, the hydrogen I'm made of has baryons in it that are 14 billion years old. They came together to give me a peace where I am able to actually join the positive and the negative, the antimatter and the matter, and find that balance after having expressed myself for 100 years of desire. You know what I'm saying? This is the nature of the very substance we're made of. It understands desire. It created us out of desire. And it created sleep and death for the fact that it recognized the value of returning to that balance. Something it will never be able to do for as long as it continues to create what we all experience. You know what I'm saying? So in that sense, death is the blessing. It returns us to the moment of peace we had until us little things recognized we were still here. You know? Oh, I have a friend that has an open studio. I was hoping that I could
cool.
grab you guys and go over there with me. What time is it?
7:20. 7:20.
7:20. Well, we got a little bit of time. You guys have any questions? Anything come to mind?
I have a question. If if you wouldn't mind elaborating on the Dogon masks, you said there was some spirituality behind it,
All right, well,
or if you want to go somewhere else with it too. I don't.
no, it's all good, it's all good. The Dogon are a people that I do not know as well as I know the Yoruba or the Congo. But the Dogon are famous for seeing Sirius B. Sirius A is visible from with the naked eye. But the Dogon said that they were from a star that circles Sirius A, and they called it Sirius B. And the thing about Sirius B is that it is a very low light star, and you can't see it without a telescope. But they knew that this twin set of stars, and they were from the Sirius B star.
Wow.
Let me see here. You're trying to get in here? Yeah. Hey, how's it going?
Just take a look.
Well, we're actually doing an event here right now, so you can sit with the event. Or...
I have a dinner.
Okay,
Sorry,
no problem.
sorry.
That's it. So, basically, these folks are an intensely deep people with very deep things going on in their culture. When you look at the binary system that they work with, I'm familiar with the Yoruba way in which the binary works, which is basically you have 8 bits. Those 8 bits have 16 bits of information that they can possibly hold. Binary, so 8 gives you 16 bits. And those 16 bits have 256 possible combinations. And that's basically how our computers work. Our computers work by taking 8 bits and being able to use 8 bits to hold 256 independent bits of information.
So I don't know nothing. So Yoruba, there are different regions in Africa
Yes.
that are dominantly Yoruba?
Yes, Yoruba are mostly from Nigeria.
Okay.
Nigeria is where the Oyo Empire was, and where Ile-Ife, the earlier empire to the Oyo Empire, was.
And this is the Gold Coast as well? As
The Gold Coast is Ghana. The Gold Coast of Ghana is where the Akan were, the Akan. And then even further north is Mali, and it is in Mali where you have the Dogon. I forget what they call it. I think it's the Ivory Coast, the Gold Coast, and I forget what they call the Yoruba Coast.
But do they share, does all that, those different cultures share a base? Is there an understanding between them, or?
The way, all right, they share concepts. Those concepts have very different names and are associated with very different ancestors, but they're shared concepts. Like, for instance, say Buddhism, right?
Yeah.
And Hinduism. When you look at all the places that Buddhism and Hinduism are practiced, all the way out to Japan, where you have both the tradition of Buddha and also the tradition of these ancient archetypes, like the Monkey King. You know what I'm saying? They have different names, are associated with different kingdoms, have a different way of being expressed. I would say in West Africa, there's even more diversity amongst overlapping archetypes. You know what I'm saying? So, you'll have Yoruba influenced cultures like Dahomey or Arara, which is the Republic of Benin, which is why they call themselves the Republic of Benin. Benin is actually in Nigeria, but they call themselves the Republic of Benin because they are so connected to Benin culture, which is where Ile Ife is, where the Yoruba believe all man started. So here you have a people who speak a completely different language, and all their names for the angels are completely different, but the concepts are so much the same that they consider that their origins. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. You have the Khan, where an incredible thing is the fight over what is money in Western Central Africa. The Kikongo used iron as money. The Yoruba used brass as money. The brass and cowrie shells as money. The Khan and the Ashanti used gold as money. You know, the Mende used cowrie shells as well as money. There's also a tradition of cloth being money. You know, the Khan cloth was very important. The Yoruba cloth was very important, but for very different reasons. You know, so in Yoruba land, for instance, they had a marketplace. This was in the 1400s, which puts it at the same time that the Dutch were developing their marketplace. You know what I'm saying? And it was a stock market. So you'll have to ask a serious scholar who came first, but I know that the Yoruba was singing about the stock market and how the king would buy palm oil, and therefore everybody else would buy palm oil, and the price of palm oil would skyrocket. You know what I'm saying? So you have the story of the stock market that's either predates or is at the same time as the Dutch story of the first bubble around the tulip market. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? You have the story of Oshun running the bank of cowrie shells, and Oya running the marketplace, and even today when you ask stock market people what's the dew point of a stock, they're talking about when the stock goes from the marketplace, the air, to the point where it becomes dew, the bank, and drops into the banks of the water as a droplet, as a measurable amount of money, which is when it's sold. You know what I'm saying? So when it's in the market, it could be any price, but then there's the dew point which sets the price because it's been bought by the bank. You know what I'm saying? This is a very Western Central African perspective. You know, that's why I say there's a lot of our culture that is much more classical African than classical European. And unfortunately, because people don't know anything about classical African culture, they don't recognize these issues, you know. But the Doga, what's interesting to me is the idea of the Khan using gold and the Yoruba using brass or cowrie shells, you know. Who knew which was more available? You know, who knew how much gold was there? Who knew how many cowrie shells? Who knew how much brass? But the cowrie shells that the Yoruba used could only be gotten through trade, going all the way out to the Indian Ocean. So by using cowrie shells, it was the stress on the trade out to the east and having continual culture moving out from East Africa into India and China. You know what I'm saying? To get these cowrie shells. And the idea of brass, like I said, being corruptible, being changeable, and that being a quality, and also because it wasn't as soft as gold, it was actually functional as a metal. That being a quality that made it more expensive than gold. You know what I'm saying? Whereas the Khan chose gold, and their seat of power is the actual gold stool. You know what I'm saying? And you can see in these early Western Central African cultures this this attempt to define value, which is something that we still haven't done today. Our paper money is fiat money. The only value it has is the value we believe it has, and we're about to give that up for crypto money, which its value is having a history of exchanges, and that is the only value it has, of having this encrypted history, this encrypted provenance of exchange, which to us right now in the state we're in is enough of a reason for it to have value in and of itself. We're all in the art game, and the art game is about speculation of arguments of value. How can you make something that somebody can pick up and move around with them? How can you make that value so that over time it becomes more and more and more important to the culture? That kind of speculation all revolves around the concepts your cultures hold dear and the history your cultures embrace. And that's why I do SCOOL, because just by sharing this information, I am increasing its value and hopefully dispersing it more, making it more readily available as a means by which things will be valued in the future. And
this is a weird question, but would you ever think of maybe having like a book list you could give out?
No, I have a book list. There's plenty of books that I can suggest to you.
Okay.
I would suggest that Robert Ferris Thompson, he's a great author, Flash of the Spirit and African Art in Motion are two books of his that I would really suggest. Then I would suggest my godfather, John Mason, Mason like a bricklayer. His website is yta.org, Yoruba Theological Art Ministries.org, and you also might look him up as John Mason Iron Pot, and on his website he has a whole library of books available on many different subjects about Yoruba culture.
Is that John?
John, yes, exactly. John Mason, and I would suggest to start off with to read The Black Gods, A New World, Yoruba study, and I would also suggest to read Our Mothers. I mean, there's a lot of really good books of his. If you like Chongo,
What was the first author's name?
Robert Ferris Thompson.
Awesome, thank you.
And Flash of the Spirit is the book that I suggested for him, and the Black and African Art in Motion, where he starts to talk about chere, because there's no word for art in Yoruba culture. The word for art is game.
Nice.
And it's this idea, once again, of having a creative mind that allows you to have the game to change the way people see reality. And if you are able to change the way people see reality, you're able to change people. They change their actions based on the way they see reality.
That's perfect. I'm just texting myself. I'm not checking my messages.
No, please, it's all good. All right, y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, this is amazing.